guiding principle was basically these three languages: Smalltalk plus Perl. And it is a dynamic but strongly typed language. So we're going to talk about Ruby is a dynamically typed language. It means that when you are writing code, you don't have to like C or C++ say int a or int a or string b or something like that. You can leave the type declarations at when you're writing the code, so it is dynamically typed. But a lot of people confuse dynamically typed with dynamic language. Ruby is a dynamically typed as well as a dynamic language. What does it mean by dynamic language? It means that you can modify the language in some way. You can create new types. You can write new code. You can create new code at runtime. So it is possible to basically introduce new types at runtime. It is possible to introduce new methods into the language at runtime. It is possible even to change existing classes, existing types that are defined in the language at runtime.
Any listeners over here?
Can speak.
Sorry?
English can speak.
Okay. So no Lisp analogy.
Yeah. Cool. So how many of you are familiar with other dynamic languages like like those who are in Python or any other language? Just trying to compare it. What does strongly typed mean actually? Right? If you're familiar with JavaScript, you can say in JavaScript 1 plus hello and it will coerce the fixed num and it will return one hello actually. It will just concatenate things. In Ruby, if you try to do this 1 plus hello, you will throw a type error. You cannot add a string and an integer. That's the difference between that's the JavaScript is a rigid type language, Ruby is a strongly typed language. You can circumvent that error that you are getting in type error by extending the fixed num class, but that's like this as you do it. But the point here of this slide is that the strongly typed this thing is not enforced in the language. Like for example, you take Java, the strong typing is enforced by the language. Ruby, the strong typing of it's a strongly typed language. It comes as a convention. That's how you're supposed to do things in the Ruby. It is not that you can conveniently you can have same behavior as JavaScript as well because the language allows it. So that distinction should be clear when you're writing your own library or code, that you should not try to do automatic type conversion. That thing is generally a no-no in Ruby. So we don't do that. So strong typing is a language convention rather than a language enforced thing. Any questions here?
Is that making sense? Or any examples needed, or you need to go?
So let's see another method. We're going to take another example. So if you in JavaScript, there is a method called collect milk, and you passing an array of cow in Python. Then in JavaScript, what JavaScript is most likely to do is it will probably the method will succeed without any problems. It might do hen and Python, which cannot be mimicked actually, and just collect milk from a cow and return it. Okay. So that is the way JavaScript looks at strongly typed convention. On the other hand, if you as a programmer is writing a method called collect milk, and you are given this argument, you should raise a type error. You should throw exception. That's the difference. If you are writing any method and you are getting something that you don't expect, generally as a library or as a programmer, you are supposed to throw an error, not just accept it. That is the language convention of strong typing in Ruby. Okay. Clear? Now we are going to say that first thing we said was Ruby is an object-oriented programming language. Everything in Ruby is objects. Your methods are objects. Methods that you define in Ruby are objects. Your classes, the class, something that you define, they themselves are objects. If you are coming from Java or something like that, or Java or C++, the methods are nothing but templates from which object instances were created. You don't have any handle on those declarations actually. They are not objects. Your lambdas are objects. We talk about that a bit. Integers, any primitive types they are called in other languages, are objects as well in Ruby.
So one interesting thing about looking at Ruby, that ties into this class objects thing is, I don't know if I can express this clear enough, but I'll try and you guys can tell me if I'm getting across. If you're programming in C++ or Java, you look at a file, a class. You look at the name class something, and you're automatically categorizing that as outside. This is a wrapper for the actual code, right? My code sits inside the variable. The variables are code. What is inside my function body is a code. The method body of the function definition, the outside, that's a wrapper, right? That's how you're thinking. You're thinking my code is here, and I'm structuring it by putting a class around it, by putting a function. This is true or not true? You're not consciously thinking about it, but you always have this outside, inside, right? Grouping going. The interesting thing with Ruby is that group, that kind of outside, inside, you can throw it away. Because what happens is the Ruby interpreter starts reading it line by line. When it sees class, that is actual running code. It is not metadata that goes to the compiler or to the interpreter. It is actually an object, right? If you change the syntax slightly, you can actually store that in a variable. So you have to forget that outside inside thing. You will line by line read it. You are writing, and this is again nice back to the previous slide that Hemant was talking about, wherein Ruby is programmable. What you don't realize is when you're writing a program in Ruby, you are actually modifying the structure of the language. You're not giving the compiler instructions saying, here is a structure created and put this code in here. That's not what you're doing. You're actually changing the structure at runtime. I'm not sure if that makes sense. But your interpreter is basically an API to the AST if I'm going to get technical. Does that make sense? Or am I going to?
No, can I add to it?
Sure.
So, for example, CPP, when you say class, we can't put executable statement between your method definition and class. C has a special structure when you're defining a class. Like you can put, you can create a method, you can put some, you can't even put constants in between, right? After the class statement. But you can do a puts, for example. You can, in Ruby, you can say execute something or like call this method inside a class definition, even before you define a method, which means Ruby executes it as you go along. So nothing is kind of special. It's all executed code. That's I think.
So the point we're trying to drive is that you have to come out of the mentality of Java and C++ and understand that the classes that you are defining, they themselves are objects, and they themselves can be manipulated and as any other object that you create. Okay, and it's not just a template that is used to copy and create instances. Okay.
And the important thing to keep in mind is everything is an object except when performance matters. And this is typically not exposed to you, right? You will not realize it, and it's like that's fine, right? What they do is, as long as there is a strange dichotomy for certain things, like lambdas are an excellent example, okay? Wherein in most cases lambdas are actually objects, except that for performance reasons there are ways, a common way to use lambdas does not involve the creation of an object. It's a hack. It's almost an interpreter level hack to make things work. And there you break consistency. So it's important to keep in mind that everything is a class or an object, except that there are a few special cases where they hack that to avoid it for performance reasons.
So how do you define a class in Ruby? Since some of you are new to Ruby, this is how you define a class in Ruby. You define class for God. And initialize is nothing but a constructor if you're familiar with C++, Java. And there you would at the rate is called instance variables, and you initialize, and then you call car.new when you have a Ferrari car, and you can call say.name. Then the output is going to be Ferrari. So this is how we define classes in Ruby. It should be.
So for people who are completely new, any questions? Because he will build a little bit on these basic concepts. So if there's any confusion, I thought this two hands work. If you're getting confused about anything, just ask, because otherwise there may be other slides that the value will get reduced.
Any questions on this one? No? Modules. So Ruby doesn't have multiple inheritance like C++ has. It's diamond hierarchy, but not actually. So Ruby doesn't have multiple inheritance, but like Ruby has something called modules, or they are often used as mixins. What is exactly there? They themselves, they cannot be instantiated. If you are coming from Java background, think of them as your interfaces. Except in interfaces methods you cannot put any body, but in Ruby modules are like your, like you can put methods there, and then you can include these modules in your actual classes.
So can I add something there?
Yeah.
How many of you here knows Visual Basic? Okay, so the modules concepts go familiar with how it works in Visual Basic or Basic, where you have additional usable methods that you can add on, whether it's related or not related to your class. Okay, something we can also relate it to kind of friends at various levels whenever there is necessary.
So I'm going to this example the next slide. This is I'm defining a module called animal behavior. Like we are animals here, right? So we eat, right? And it just there's an actual animal called dog, and we are including that animal behavior in it. And now we can eat actually. Okay. So this way, if you can create a class called human and we include animal behavior in it, the human class as well gets all the methods from animal behavior. And that is what exactly is the purpose of modules. It's a way to include behaviors in other classes. And that's the way you should use modules.
Yeah, it's basically what Java interfaces could have been. Right?
Yeah.
Java interfaces is like halfway to this.
And that's the way a lot of people, when they start coding, they don't know how to use this.
Yeah.
For example, one question that often comes to me is like, I've got this active record class, and like I'm not sure, a lot of you Rails programmers, and this class is now like 1,500 times. And how do I break it up? Now, one simple way is look at that class, and it will have behaviors. Certain some part of the code will deal with authentication. Some part of code that class will deal with, like let's say payment. Just give me a rough example, and you can extract those things as behaviors, and then you can include it, and that way you can shorten up your actual class declaration, which has become too big.
So two key rules of a good module. Okay. Ideally all modules, but unfortunately out of the wild it's not good. But two key rules. A module does not have its own state. If you'll notice in this example, there is no instance variable, there is no state to the module. The module depends on modifying the state of the objects it's mixed in. It's a behavior. It is literally like everybody says that, right? Objects in object-oriented objects are a combination of data and methods that operate on the data. This is a generalization of those methods. There is no data. So you're saying that across these few classes, I have a common behavior, not common state, common behavior, right? And I want to extract that one. Modules give you a very powerful tool to do just that. Okay, but they should not have their own state. Second rule, ideally, the module should not directly access the state of the class it's mixed in. So even if the classes have instance variables, the module should not depend on the instance variables. They should depend on the class having a method. Okay, what do I mean by this? Right? Do not have a module that is directly cutting in and touching the state of a class. A class has an interface of its own, which are its methods. Have a contract. My module will only work with classes which expose a certain method. There's a classic, for those of you who have already been using Ruby for a while, you may not have realized it, but you're doing this in the array method, array and enumerable. Right? So there is an enumerable module in Ruby standard. If you take a look at it, it is practically the textbook example that is sent. Okay? How does it work? Enumerable gives you a bunch of additional methods to operate on collections, any collection. Right? In Ruby, it's already mixed into a bunch of things. It's mixed into arrays, mixed into hashes. Right? So it's already plugged into a few collection objects in Ruby. However, let's say that you go write your own B-tree class. Right? You're writing your own binary table. Obviously, the internal state of the binary tree looks nothing like the internal state of an array. Right? If you think about how you implement the array, the variables, everything are completely different. However, as long as your B-tree class has an each method, which gives you standard iteration exactly like Ruby, you can mix Ruby's std with enumerable into it and it will just work. So that's the intention. You expose the contract for the module through the methods of the class, not through the internal state. Because the internal state can be wildly different. Just like I said in a B-tree and an array, it will be wildly. Right? So these are the two kind of good rules to apply in writing your own modules.
So basically,
No state, contract through methods.
If you are cutting through the class state and accessing the class directly, like accessing the instance variables of the class directly in the module method, you can. But the problem will be that this module will only be able to mix into that particular class. So you are basically coupling it, type coupling. It's no longer just a behavior that included in anything in the object.
So then that will you for the next question you ask is why did I even extract the module? I mean at that point you're splitting up your class into two files. It's still the same class. If you can't use the module anywhere else, there's no reason for it.
Yeah.
One question. So how is this different from an external object talking to this object? Because an external object can't access the state directly except through the methods.
So the external object is intended to work with the class, not to give it new behavior. So to the consumer of this class,
Okay.
you're changing the interface of this class to its consumers. There's a difference. I'm not working with the class, I'm changing its public interface in fact.
Okay.
So now, before animal behavior was put into dog, a dog wouldn't eat. Now it can. That is the intent.
Even then, we make sure we don't touch the state.
Yeah, even then you make sure you don't touch it.
If we have to, for example, in that case in dog class I will define some accesses, and then I can happily use that accesses from the module, and which is okay.
Which is generic enough.
Yeah, it is generic enough, and that pattern works.
And the reason by that I'm calling this out is in fact this rule is consistently violated in Ruby's own standard books.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's kind of why it's important, like in Ruby you keep running, and Rails as well, you keep running into this problem wherein there is enough code written before people realize it was an anti-pattern. So following them is not necessarily the best idea. So that's the reason I'm calling it.
Any questions?
Modules are also commonly used for as namespaces.
Yeah.
So the unfortunate thing is Ruby doesn't actually support first-class namespaces. So modules are a horrible clutch that we use as an alternative. But they create a whole host of other problems.
So Ruby has this global objects space actually. Everything we define goes by default in that global thing, and there's no per file scope, there's nothing. So unless you wrap your classes or whatever defined in modules, they're all going to go into that global thing. And that's the reason modules are used as a poor man namespace.
Yeah. But it's important, I mean, that's a separate conversation you can have outside of this, but it's important to realize the limitations of modules as a namespace.
Yeah.
They were never designed for that reason.
But we don't really have another alternative.
You don't have another.
Yeah.
Which is what I'm saying, it's important to understand the limitations.
So one, like we can talk about this a bit later, but there's one way some of the libraries that uses, like when you're writing DSL or something like that, they import load a particular file in a lexically scoped anonymous module, so that whatever is defined inside that file is never taken outside. Actually, there's a trick that a lot of DSL authors use. Maybe we can talk about that later. But yeah, that's
So,
the way of doing it.
one question. When would you typically use module?
Pardon?
When would you typically create a module? I mean, under what situation normally?
The standard Java interface situation is it.
So abstraction of behavior.
It's abstraction of behavior, but then like I said, interfaces are going, halfway to where the string is.
So-
You're basically, sorry.
Behavior, then I have to define behavior, and then I have to define a namespace.
Oh, when I have to define names. Oh, sorry, there's a third use case which nobody talks about because, it's kind of, how many Java people here before I start making too many Java analogies? Okay, so you guys remember all the util static classes, right? So for the rest of you in Java, it's a common convention that I don't know where to put this method. It doesn't have enough associations to have another class. Like I'm not going to build a full object for it. I don't know where to put it, so I have this catch-all thing called a utility class and I put static method. It's basically an anti-pattern, right? It's a catch-all place where you go shove things which you haven't thought about enough or which don't have. So you often use modules. You may see this pattern. You'll see a module in the code base. It'll say class less than self end inside, and there'll be methods inside that. So that class less than self does nothing but say that everything inside this should be a class method, which is kind of like syntactically equivalent to Java static methods, though it's not the same thing. That's a different. We'll talk about that maybe later. But the other third use is a catch-all utils place where you want to put methods that have no home.
In general, but you don't want
to do that. That's
That's
right.
an anti-pattern, and in your code base, anything. In fact, it is like one of the mascot rules, I believe, where if you have a class named util, you're doing something wrong. You should be more specific. Okay, so output. Once you mix in that behavior, animal behavior, the output is